Welcome back. So we're chatting to Mohammed Noor. He's a political analyst. As I said, many would remember him from CII in the early days. And prior to the break, we were talking about in this age of information overload, with the kind of in your palm, you're receiving news, views, interviews, analysis, perspective. How do you go about, deciding what to take, when to take, how to take, and what to do with it? And Mohammed kind of gave us an indication of how he charts around this. There's a lot of talk these days, Mohammed, about South Africa. I just returned last week from London, and
test for corona.
Interestingly, I was worried as I stepped down in Heathrow. I had a bit of a flu, and I get the flu also ever so often. And I thought, hey, this is Heathrow, this is London. There were already a number of cases at that time. And I'm thinking, I hope they're not going to look out for temperature and this kind of thing and put me one side, because I landed like 7:30 in the morning and I had a Jummah commitment that same morning. And I walked through, there was nothing, absolutely nothing. No screening, no testing, just a couple of posters on the wall here and there saying that if you have these symptoms, then contact your nearest official. And when I came back, I was there just for the weekend. There was one or two programs. And my wife tells me on the phone that, my friends yesterday, they came back from Turkey and they made them sit 2 hours on the plane testing them. So, if you're telling me you're landing 10 o'clock, I'll come fetch you 12 o'clock. And I landed and walked through Tambo breeze, just that normal heat detector thing at immigration. So, yeah. But anyway, what I was saying is that when I was in London, this question comes up. And in every part of the world, how do you as a South African analyze the state of your country? Considering that you had state capture, considering that you have economic constraints, you've got now ESCOM, and you've got SA, and you've got all of that on the negative side. On the positive side, what we've achieved in 25 years and what we managed to avert and that kind of thing. But is it optimistic? Is it pessimistic? The outlook for the short to medium term? What are the essentials? What do we look at? Everyone's got an opinion. I mean, around a braai stand, around a walima function, everyone's got an opinion. It's gross generalization. The country is going to the dogs. It's just going to get worse. Or there are those who are on the other extreme of that particular debate and saying, things will come right, but without any basis for saying that it'll come right. How do you analyze South Africa?
Wow. لو كنت أعلم الغيب لاستكثرت من الخير وما مسني السوء. If we knew the unseen, we would accumulate richness. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I think first of all, it is the nature of any person, any event, any situation, to have positives and negatives. So any country has positive, negatives. So South Africa can be going down and can be coming up. There is not contradiction, because when you talk about something like a country, it's impossible to perceive that something as a country is alive. A country is a living organism. It has people, it has factories, machinery, minds, money, people movement. It's culture, language, expression, etc., etc. So to make a general selection, like it's doing good, it's doing bad, it can be doing good, it can be doing bad at the same time. And I think we should not be scared, to face the fears, and we should not be shy to embrace and accept the positives.
Yeah,
that's very ambiguous, but I think that's a very important principle. And it's a very important principle because a lot of people, I don't know again what a lot means, but many people you come across, talk about migration, about leaving, about selling assets, etc. So, emotions have a big part to play. It's a very big part in what drives the world. An example, you can have stock market. The stock market crashed, So there's a construction company. Shares are worth like 100 rand. Crashes, it goes to 50 rand. Just as an example, right?
Cecil is a good example.
Okay, over 5 years, 4 years, right? But guess what? They're still producing, they're still employing, they still value, right? But it's emotion. It's emotions of investors, emotions of politicians. In them days, I remember the good old days of Alan Greenspan. If Alan Greenspan walked into a room, who was the Secretary of US Treasury, if he walked into a room and he just didn't look well, markets would crash. That's how powerful Greenspan was. Greenspan, if he just hesitated when they asked him a question, markets would jitter. But based on what? On an emotion. So hence, again, how people feel about the product, today marketing, why do you wear this brand? Really, a jeans is a jeans, mostly. But people's affiliation to a brand, people's emotions. So emotions are very important when it comes to as far as it has an impact on how people view, and how even analysts view, and even how other governments view, and whether investors. I mean, what is trust? Big question is, do people trust our politicians? Do people trust the South African government? What does trust mean? Trust means, do you trust that the South African government, when it says we will not nationalize the Reserve Bank, do they trust them? Do they have confidence in them? Do they trust the people who are saying this, that they are truthful, honest people? Do they trust the system? And what is trust? Trust is an emotion. Until you betray my trust, there's no for me knowing whether I can trust you or not. No, is it, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's an emotion. So I know it sounds highly philosophical, but these are very soft but very important issues when it comes to analyzing and looking at and approaching things differently. So is South Africa good or bad? And I think this is, for me, in a nutshell, the problem we have in South Africa is that there are positive indicators. Definitely. Positive indicators is there's more transparency, example, in Eskom. Whether they can fix it or not is another issue. There's more transparency in, example, PRASA, our railway association. There's more transparency in that. There is more the Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, he's got a plan. And he's very open about the plan, and it makes good sense. There is a positive. Can he implement it or not? So there are many positives. For example, 2 days ago, Richard Mluli, the ex-head of crime intelligence, I think he was found guilty. I don't know if it was sentenced or something, right? There's a Zondo commission. So there are many. Okay. The problem with South Africa is that to what end do we want these positives to go? Okay, so there's a Zondo commission, and then people get locked up. And then what happens? The lights are going to come on, right? So the question is, to what end? So these positive elements, and there's many of them, number one, they collectively give a positive impression about the country, which we hope would then have instilled confidence, that emotion, confidence in investors, which eventually would then lead to investment in the country, stability in the market, less speculation, etc. So that is where we would like to see all of these positive issues heading towards collectively. Fixing Eskom alone will not solve issues. Fixing SAA alone will solve issues. I think what we are lacking in this general positive, in the positive box, is probably decisiveness. People would have loved to have seen the president being more decisive. People would have loved to have seen expediency. People and the other issue with the positive box is it's very fragile. It's very slow. Right? It's very fragile because numerous issues you're dealing with, for the lack of better, with the old Zuma regime. Within the ANC, there might not necessarily be the type of support that you would expect the president to have. So there is the suspicion, and I use the word suspicion, that the president is being undermined. But I mean that I don't think there's a president in the world who is not at any time being undermined by either opposition or people within his party. So what's happening in South Africa with our president within the ANC, I don't think it's unique. Just look what happened to Malaysia the other day with Mahathir Mohamad. And I mean, really, how many times is Mahathir Mohamad and Anwar Ibrahim going to have this dance? He went to jail, he came out, and is doing it to Anwar Ibrahim again. It happens all over the world. It's not unique to South Africa, where you find the president is under pressure from his allies or under pressure from his opposition. I'm not talking about the merits of whether it's right or wrong or good or bad or exists or doesn't exist, I'm not even verifying and saying that it does exist, but I'm just saying in the overall context, the type of hurdles the president has to cross, it's very normal. It's very normal. I personally believe that so first of all, on these issues, right, I believe that a divided ANC is better than a united ANC.
Okay.
Of course. what happened with the United ANC during the Zuma regime? Everyone was covering up for everyone else. When we woke up, we were, I think, $500 billion in debt. That is in one SOE. I heard the Minister of Transport say yesterday that apparently these trains that they said we got from Spain, it seems to be going the path that these trains never existed. They cannot find these trains.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying, so a united ANC.
But it depends on what they are united, right? Okay, your point is valid. When they were united in blind loyalty to Zuma, it cost us. But the current factionalism within the ANC has left them hamstrung. The president knows what to do, but he can't do it because of this opposing faction within the party, the division within the party.
The ANC has, I use this word very cautiously, an almost absolute majority in parliament. Always 57%. It'll take a long time to get them below 50%. And they have a few other allies here and there. And a majority because of the provinces that they run. It's almost an absolute majority in the country, right? And hence, within the ANC, there is no external mechanism that can regulate them. No DA. Maybe here and there the Constitutional Court has regulated some issues regarding President Zuma. The High Court yesterday gave... So, I mean, but that's not regulation. That is pronouncing on ad hoc issues here and there. But at an operational level, you cannot regulate the ANC and you cannot control the ANC. And you cannot influence the ANC unless you a funder or you a stakeholder internally and maybe that you could at some level, maybe, you know, using examples like the nuclear deal, you know, I mean, that also hasn't been verified. But let's just say, for example, at something that level, right? So hence, the ANC needs, I believe it's healthy for the country to have factionalism within the ANC. Man, we had Thabo Mbeki who people clap. People clap for Thabo Mbeki. But this is the guy who had the Minister of Health who went publicly and said potatoes and beetroot. I don't know if you remember. Alec Irwin was the one who came out and said a bolt fell down a turbine in Coburg when we had the first blackouts. And he also made a comment about Chinese espionage or Chinese sabotage or something.
Yes.
I mean, they went to Thabo Mbeki with us, telling him, listen, this was happening at Eskom. I mean, so even a united ANC that was quote-unquote headed by intellectuals, they felt this because they were all clapping for each other. I mean, people forget Thabo Mbeki had his own little nuclear deal, the pebble bed modular reactor. If you looked, one of the first things interim president or President Kgalema Motlanthe did when he came in was he cancelled that also. And by that time, they would already run through a couple of billion in research. So a united ANC, because the ANC runs, like it runs government, period, you know, irrespective of what. And I'm not saying the DA is good or bad and if it's good or bad. That's not the issue. We're just saying in real politics, the ANC needs an internal mechanism. And even if it's factionalism, I have no idea what these guys would do if they left alone. And the factionalism in the ANC, at the moment, I don't think it's a problem. Remember when we went out of Polokwane, it took some time. I mean, remember out of Polokwane for the next year and a half, 2 years, everyone was thinking, you know, it's going to be a comeback from the TM guys, and COPE was formed, and, you know, but after a while, all of that disappeared. Statistically, you should also remember, statistically, you know, if you look at the ministers that were brought in, most of them are new ministers. Many of them were removed. And even those who came in from the Zuma regime, many of them have been, you know, they've been, for the lack of a better word, converted. They have been, right? Even the NEC. Most of the NEC is with the president. Even in the provinces, yes, there's a branch here, there's a branch there, and there's noises here. But, you know, overall provinces support the president. And also knowing that Deputy President David Mabuza was one of the anchors and one of the pillars of the Zuma clan that came over into the front. And you must remember something else. The Zuma clan, when it was in power, it ran every organ in this country, from security guards and from cleaners up the way to ministers. And with that, they could not win the last conference. There is no way they're coming back. It's because they're incompetent. They are grossly incompetent. I mean, these guys are incompetent. I think this is probably a new benchmark which you can use in the Oxford and Webster Dictionary. Competent. I mean, poor people, you know, brought the Zuma regime to power in terms of votes and kept the ANC there. And that is your biggest meal. That is your biggest free ride, your biggest ticket. And they were this close on the verge of totally destroying the social grant system. I mean, this is your number one ticket. This is your winning horse, and you come this close to destroying SASA, to destroying that whole system because of corruption. And it's not the corruption; it's total incompetence. But coming back to the issue, of where the ANC is. So
just ask you to hold that thought. We're just going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with
Okay.
that, right? So let's take the break. When we come back, we continue the chat with Mohammed Noor. Welcome back. So we're chatting with Mohammed Noor, a political analyst, and prior to the break, we were talking about how do you go about analyzing the state of the country, and Mohammed was listing some of the positive indicators and talking about the state of the ANC. If we look at this whole discussion about leadership, and there's a lot about that currently in South Africa, it's not only the president, it's the broader aspect of leadership. What's your take on that? I mean, what's realistic to expect from political leadership? Sometimes people kind of conflate those issues. Politicians are politicians at the end of the day, and they're driven by very narrow political, financial, personal interests.
And that's not a problem, because politicians around the world behave like that. And almost all of them, most of them in Europe, countries like, even countries like Iran, China, they deliver. And hence I always say, people find this strange. I said I don't have an issue with corruption really, because politics by its nature, it's unethical. Political systems, they are unethical. There is nothing ethical in them. And once you put your finger in there, that's so corruption is just like one portion of one part of one facet of it. Political systems are totally unethical. Modern political systems. So the issue is not politicians. The issue is whether politicians are competent. And that is the problem, and it comes back to the previous issue of the previous regime. The previous regime was grossly incompetent, and that's what drove the country down. Because neglect, gross negligence, of infrastructure, gross negligence at every level. It shows that the incompetent people that were appointed, and there's enough examples of this. So. Gross negligence, incompetence, that is South Africa's problem. Not necessarily quote-unquote corrupt politicians. Now, people say it's the same thing. No, it's not necessarily the same thing. You can have many politicians who are quite good and decent people, and they're also incompetent, or you can have someone who's very corrupt but is competent. And I would rather someone who's corrupt and steals a lot of money but actually delivers. And if you go around the world, there are scandals happening everywhere, right? But at a more tangible level, and let's look at South Africa's reference. Let's not look at Europe, because South African politicians will say Western hegemony and whatever, right? If you go to the Iranian cabinet, I think the Iranian cabinet, once upon a time, they had the highest percentage of Ivy League graduates in the cabinet. All of those guys came from Harvard, MIT, and the rest of them came from Oxford. Professional leadership. You go to the Iranian cabinet, you go to the Iranian parliament, every second guy, you don't find someone who's under a master's sitting in cabinet there. And of course, I give policies to parliamentarians. We have ministers and people in this country who can't read a number higher than 1,000. And this is not hearsay. Go on YouTube and you'll see them. Now, this is not racist about saying you can't read English, you can't read English. That's not the issue. The issue is, if there's a technical document in front of you, you have the capacity to make. And guess what? These guys are making decisions on our lives, about our finances, about our education, etc. So the issue is the technical competence, general competence of decision makers, right through, especially in parliament. Now someone says, well, leadership is not just about education. Okay, I understand that. But okay, let's see leadership without formal education. Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan of UAE. Leadership without education, in 25, 30 years, see where it took that country. The leaders of Al Saud weren't educated. See where they took the country in 30, 40 years from the desert. Al Sabah. Okay, are you doing that? Okay, so we've given you 25 years of leadership without quote-unquote education. What have you done? So, it's very, very important for us to get into. Now, people say, do you want the country run by technocrats? Why not? Remember, South Africa, we are in a state of emergency. And this brings us back to the other point, is when we have the positive block. But what's happening in the negative block? The problem in South Africa is that the negative block, we are not arresting that decline. So when you look at education, the decline in education, we're not arresting it. It's not stopping. Forget about it curving up. It's not stopping decline. Health, the decline is not stopping. Safety and security, the decline is not stopping. South African National Defence Force is on the verge of bankruptcy. Every month and a half, 2 months, you hear about, and I'm not talking about these YouTube videos about people falling and trucks falling over. Official statements from the minister and the chief of army and so forth, talking about the dire straits that the army is in, and the army is in charge of securing our borders. Then you want to ask, why are we sitting with so many illegal immigrants, etc.? The rule of law, police force, security forces is one thing. Rule of law is something else. The fact that you have such an amount of illegal citizens, and I might sound xenophobic, but listen, I can't cross this road without a license if a cop stops me. I need a license to get in my car. And if he pulls me over, and if I don't have my license, I get fined, right? So no one is above the law, should be above the country. So the fact that you have millions of illegal, undocumented foreigners who think that it's okay to be in this country and to behave in that way shows that there's total disrespect for law in this country. That is not being arrested. It's not stopping. And gender-based violence, etc., etc. So my issue is, I'm not being statistical saying, last year there were 100 murders, this year there's 99 murders. The overall atmosphere of the non-respect for law, the lawlessness. So the issue is that the problems that we are having, they're still continuing to decline. So yes, at ESCOM, there is something happening with the black houses happening, in SAA, within the SOE space there is. But again, you have a minister of police who walks around with coats and fedoras. Again, this is not conspiracy, this is fact. A minister of police who wants to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens but does not provide any solution to crime. A minister of transport who wants to fine illegal Uber drivers 100,000 rand. That's fine if they're against the law. That's the fine. Okay, what about regular taxi drivers who and the issues there? So my issue is, what are the stats in education? These issues are not getting better at a glance. And statisticians will probably come and argue with getting better, but we don't need something getting better where a statistician comes and shows me, there's a 1% or 0.5% increase. We need to solve issues, in a manner where the average man in the street can say, what, I can see it's getting better. More money in my pocket, more savings, safer, So, and this is the conundrum in South Africa. And hence the issue of leadership, and this is where it ties up. Cyril Ramaphosa is our president. As Mohammed Noor Nadine, I support him. And I voted for him. I voted for him. And there's my confidence. And I voted for President Zuma as well. I mean, when Zuma came out, I use it very loosely. All of us go part of the Zuma for, And I really believe that the current administration, for South Africa, we need a reform in the administration and to support it. So no getting rid of the ANC, no getting rid of Cyril Ramaphosa. Those are just dreams of people and analysts. But what is needed is competency. We lack competency. We lack focus. And I believe that President Cyril Ramaphosa is in the process. And if you look, he's doing slow changes, because remember, a very big principle about the ANC and in ANC culture and South African culture, and I don't really agree with it always, it's consensus. We love consensus, In South Africa, consensus is so, probably because of our history, is we would like the amount of resources we would spend in consensus to speak to the minority. Like there's 100 people and there's 4 or 5 who disagree. So whether it be a Muslim community, Jewish community, or whatever, even a minority in the opinion in the room. And South Africa is very interesting, even in a political culture. You can do with one person who has a divergent opinion. He can make the loudest noise in the room, and we're okay with it in this country. Very interesting part of our political culture here. And ANC love consensus. They love consensus. And I think that is one of the problems. Is we try to move forward, and we pay too much attention to a consensus, which sometimes and seeking this consensus can delay the process, and at what cost?
Yeah, and it doesn't arrest the decline.
It doesn't arrest the decline. And I think that is where we're sitting. But I personally have faith in our president. And I mean, we won't have faith in him forever, you know. And the question is, you know, how long is a piece of string? How long do we give him space? I think the president could have done a little bit better. But if you understand where South Africa came from, what happened in the Zuma administration, not just what happened there, but the dynamics of what happens within government, within the ANC, within opposition, within the AFF, etc., it's a very steep hill to climb. And I don't see how a different president could have done anything different to what Cyril Ramaphosa is doing at the moment.
Right, time for our final break. When we come back, we're wrapping up the discussion with Mohammed Noor. Welcome back. So we're having this interesting chat with Mohammed Noor about the state of South Africa and how to analyze it and how to gain perspective on the issues that we face in the country. We have a couple of minutes left. Just before the break, you were talking about our love for generating consensus, and this is also something within the ruling party. They want to bring everybody on board and get buy-in, and that sometimes slows you down, and the problems worsen and the issues escalate. I'm hearing people talk these days, in South Africa in particular, but even in other parts of the world, that look, democracy is on its place, it has its benefits, but what we need now to deal with the problems, these very real problems that continue to accelerate in the downward spiral, is a kind of benevolent dictator that exists within the democratic framework, and there is space for that, and society will be somewhat tolerant, someone turning a blind eye to that if the person can get the job done. I don't know, what's your thought on that?
And I continue my earlier comment about South Africa looking to its friends, who they admire. The Chinese do that. Do you think Vladimir Putin takes nonsense? Do you think Xi Jinping and his people take nonsense from the street? If they need to do something, they do it. Right? Mahathir Mohamad, you know, they were democracies, but they made sure they had the consensus that they needed to do things. You know, the Iranians, when the Ayatollah took over in the early 80s, they were right at the back of the development index. It didn't even exist. There must have been 150 something. Today they're sitting in the top 20 development index, you know. Under sanctions, how did the Iranians do that? They've got a very interesting democratic system there. When I say democratic, I mean at an administrative level, and things work. And I think South Africa probably needs, Singapore, a very good example of that. I think people fear the word dictatorship, and in South Africa, because of our history, we fear that. But guess what? Everyone comes from those type of histories. What history does China and Russia come from? I mean, there you talk about tens of millions of people who died from the 40s, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s in starvation, war, etc. I mean, if the amount of people in South Africa who died between Russia and China, there won't be a single South African left. Right? Those people saw it. Europe saw about 80 million people die in World War II, and they made it out. You need to push. You need to be serious. I think South Africa, to a great extent, we are probably obsessed sometimes with issues, like soft human rights issues, plants, trees, dogs, my graveyard. Habibi, if you want to put a road through my grandfather's grave and people are going to get water and they're going to survive, Habibi, do it, man. That's me personally. My grandfather, he is where he needs to be. We try to please too many people. And this is the interesting part about democracy. When our constitution was written in the early 90s, our constitution was beyond and more liberal and forward-thinking than other constitutions, like that, because we took from the Canadians and Western Europeans and so forth. And that's probably something that held us back. But the problem in South Africa is, when you have the type of failures in security, failures in safety, when you have high levels of crime, high levels of gender-based violence, you start one has to be very concerned about the word saying, do we need a benevolent dictatorship? But I think what we do need is presidents. Maybe a reform in the constitution where we can directly elect the president. Maybe we need a president-prime minister system. Maybe we need a federal system. maybe a federal system will work, like if every chief can run his own little part of the country, and you only give us taxes for foreign affairs, give us taxes for defense, and give us taxes for national institutions, and the rest of the money do as you please. You can even have your own federal courts, so people don't necessarily need to go. There are ways, and maybe it is time for South Africa to look at different ways to manage the country as a whole. But again, your stumbling block is that you have an ANC, so you need a reformed ANC. Maybe from a numbers perspective, if you look at how the ANC has declined over the last, let's say, 2-3 elections, you probably need another 2 elections for ANC to hit just below 50%. And then you can put a coalition. So at least another 4 elections before you can actually, unless something drastic happens, But no, a benevolent dictatorship, I would be very worried about it, because no dictator is benevolent. When it's you in the firing line, or you get locked up for not doing anything, or you just get locked up because of the whim of dictator, then it's not nice. But what we do need, and what is it that benevolent dictatorships do? What is the essence? Is they're efficient, they're expedient, they might not necessarily be consensus, and there's always quote unquote collateral damage. And this is the problem, who is the collateral damage, especially in South Africa again. I might make jokes of it, but if government comes tomorrow in Boerkap and say, hey, we need to build a tunnel through Boerkap, man, can you imagine what's going to happen? My family's from there. I might make fun of it. But so it's not that easy. But what we need in South Africa is decisiveness, most probably, not most definitely. We also need patience, and so when I came back from overseas now the other day, I was thinking to myself, we have one of the largest coastlines in the world. We have an amazing labor force, despite people talk about unions, and that's correct. But the labor force in South Africa, what we produce, the professionals that we have in this country, the resources that we have. South Africa should not be a developing nation. South Africa should be amongst the most advanced nations in the world. Really, we have everything. And we have amazing people in this country. Again, this is not, unfortunately, one of the issues of Twitter and social media is you just see a lot of negative issues.
Yes.
But I personally believe that my outlook for South Africa is relatively positive, up to the time where we see, the question is, what is the threshold that you can't come back? I think the threshold for that is when there is no more, when internal checks and balances don't exist. So as long as within the ANC and from the opposition and from civil society there are checks, there are balances, there are voices, there is pressure, we're good. And as long as we have a democracy where we are protected, where people can criticize, people can have a different opinion. I mean, some of our expressions of democracy in South Africa, it's way beyond what you would find in other parts. So it comes to criticizing presidents and ministers. And we have ministers who are very okay. Our ministers laugh when you make fun of them.
You don't get locked up.
You don't get locked up.
Yeah.
So no, I feel that it definitely is positive, and inshallah, we just keep on working.
Mohammed, it's been a fascinating discussion. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but hopefully we'll have you on the program sometime soon again, inshallah.
Barakallah fiik.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa
Assalamu rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
To the viewers, until next week, inshallah, fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.